to go.
All right, great. Hi, I'm Onlee Bowden, and I own a company called In Your Own Words. I teach public speaking. It's really the thing I love to do, and what I want to do is start off with a story that I think kind of highlights how we approach and feel about public speaking. A couple years ago, my mother-in-law turned 90 years old. Now, when most people turn 90, you know, they worry about, are they going to have a party that's going to be worth, you know, people attending, and that was her big concern. She thought she was going to have a party where a bunch of 89 and 90-year-old people would be sitting around a table and with a minister and a funeral director circulating, but we decided we were going to do a blowout party for her, and that's what we did. We had karaoke, we had a roast for her, and we had, oh, I don't know, probably 250 people that attended. It was a blast. So the next day rolls around, and you remember she's 90 years old, and so she, you know, we go over to her house because we still have a lot of people in town. We go over to her house, and she takes me by the arms, and she says, "Onlee, that was the best party." And she starts to tear up. She says, "I just have one regret." And I'm, well, what's that, Anita? She said, "I wanted to say something. I'd even written something out, and I wanted to be able to get on the mic and talk." She says, "But I couldn't. I just couldn't do it." I wonder how many of you out there would admit that even within just like the last 6 months, you turned down an opportunity to speak, or you walked away from a situation and thought to yourself, "I wish I would have said something. I wish I would have said something." That's it right there. It's amazing how so many of us as professionals still are wrestling with this one issue, and that is being able to speak in front of others. Now, we all know that public speaking is #1 fear. But did you know that the professional's second fear is the fear of being found out? The fear of being found out. What does that mean? Well, someone's going to discover that I'm not as put together. I don't always have all the answers. I'm just not as cool and collected as people think I am. I mean, most of us know that because our family will tell us that at any point in time. Where do you think that the professional is going to discover that? When they are speaking in front of others. That's right. Professionals spend less and less time in front of an audience because that's the one spot that they feel the least competent. So really, public speaking becomes the professional's Achilles heel. Now, why is that a problem? It's a problem because the way that you grow your business is really by you becoming a resource to those in your industry. You become a resource to those who are your clients and your customers. And if you're not willing to be in front of people, what are the odds that you're going to become the person that they trust and rely on? It's probably going to be pretty slim. And so today I'm going to be talking about the #1 fear, which is public speaking. But I want to peel it back. I want to kind of get rid of all of the misconceptions about public speaking. And so that's why I called it Public Speaking, the Naked Truth. Because I believe that most of us really have ideas and concepts about public speaking that just isn't true. But because we hold them, we let that rule us. We let those ideas stop us, shut us down, quiet us. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about what are those misconceptions and where did they come from? How did this come about? Secondly, I want to give you some strategies for getting organized. I'm going to do that, I'm going to give you some strategies for being able to speak more comfortably in front of people. And the first one of that is getting more organized. And the second one will be, how do you handle the nervousness? Because getting organized and dealing with your nervousness are the two reasons that people usually come to me when they're looking for some kind of training or coaching in public speaking. So let me get started with all of that then. Why is it that public speaking is so hard? What makes it so darn hard? I think there are two reasons for that. I think the very first reason is because it's been poorly taught. It really has been poorly taught. Think back. When was the first time you ever took any kind of public speaking class? I'll bet you it was in high school, or maybe it was in college. If it was in high school, it was probably taught by somebody who it maybe in their English class, maybe it was maybe it was a communications class, but I'll bet you that you had a really hard organizational structure you had to follow. You were put up in front of a class with your peers who are teenagers, who are making fun of you, and it was probably a mortifying experience. And the teacher probably didn't keep you very safe. So that's your biggest, most, and first experience with public speaking. You go to college. You would think that it would be better there, and it truly isn't. It just hasn't been taught well. Something's happened in the last probably 15 years, and that is college curriculum now says that all classes have to have what's called speaking across the curriculum. Well, professors have no idea how to teach public speaking, but they have to fill that requirement. So what do? They have each and every one of you give a presentation with a PowerPoint, right? Do you remember all those? Thus, there is death by PowerPoint. So now, instead of really knowing how to speak in front of people, you know how to put together a PowerPoint presentation and how to read it. It still leaves you knowing that this is not your best hour when you have to speak in front of people. So education is the first reason why public speaking is so darn hard, because we haven't been exposed to the tools that will really help us become better at this skill set, and that's really all it is. It's a skill. Secondly, the reason that it's so difficult is because it isn't always emphasized very much in our families. You know, think about the last time that your family sat around and just told stories, and that you encouraged kids in your family just to tell stories. If you weren't telling stories as a kid and you weren't having adults listen to you and care about what you were saying, you probably never got that experience. I know a woman who lives up here in the Traverse City area, and her name is Marguerite Coteau. She is an incredible speaker. And when I asked her one time, you know, and it's so natural for her, it seems like it's so natural. I said, how did you become so good? She said, my grandfathers and my uncles and my aunts and my grandmothers, she's Puerto Rican, she said, we grew up in a family that everybody told stories. And everybody was encouraged to tell stories. She said, so I've been listening and telling stories since I was a little girl. And I know that I have worth in telling my stories. So those are, I think, a couple of reasons why we as a society, as a culture, almost as a world culture, have become less and less and less comfortable and thus capable at being able to speak in front of others. So let's take a look then at what we can do to start to change that. Now, this is only a 30-minute presentation, and so honestly, in 30 minutes, there's no way that you're going to become a better speaker by listening to what I have to say. But I do believe that if I give you some strategies to focus on, it's going to help you when you're trying to put together your next presentation. It certainly will help you and give you some things to think about. And if you want to come into the live chat, we can actually go into more depth. All right, so let's take a look at two major strategies. First, organization. Just getting your ideas organized. I'm curious, how many of you would say the night before you give a presentation, you spend the majority of that night awake? You're thinking about, all right, I know I need to say this, and then I'm going to have to mention that, and shoot, they need to hear about this piece, and if I don't mention that, they're not going to think I'm very smart, and oh my God, what if they ask me a question? And before long, your ideas become, it kind of looks like, I don't know, yesterday's oatmeal. You know, it's all clumpy and mushed together and just a mess. Can you relate to that? And most people will lose a lot of sleep just trying to figure out how to get organized. What I want to do is give you some ways to think about getting organized that will definitely help you whenever you're speaking. And this doesn't have to be for when you're giving that big presentation, you know, at the podium. These ideas help you whenever you're trying to get your ideas organized so that somebody else can listen. It starts by backing up a little bit. First, you have to ask yourself, who am I speaking to? And by that I mean you need to remember that you're speaking to a listening audience, a listening audience. Now, the difference between somebody who is a reading audience where they have something that they're reading and a listening audience is this. If you're reading something and you drift and daydream, what do you have the luxury of doing? Exactly. You can go back and you can reread and pick up whatever you missed. Now, when you're listening to somebody speak, like right now when you're listening to me, if you drift or daydream, you start to think about, oh, I like her shirt, I don't know, whatever you might start to think about. At any moment that you're drifting and daydreaming, you're not hearing what I'm saying. And so it's so easy then as a listening audience to get lost, to lose the idea. We are so easily distracted. In fact, here's what I say to people. Here's my mantra, that's the word I was looking for. Audience members are listeners, and listeners are bad at their job. Now, listeners are not bad people, we're just bad at our job as listeners. Because there's a thing called thought speed. And thought speed is that our brains can process information about 3 to 5 times faster than we speak. So as I'm finishing up my word, you've already finished it for me and you've gone wherever. You're putting together your list. You're thinking about the vacation you're going to take. You're thinking about whatever. And let's make it even worse. You're listening to me at the other end of a computer. There's so many things that could be distracting you right now. So many things. And so thought speed really wreaks havoc on the listener. Now let's take it back to the presenter. So here I am, the presenter. I have to appreciate and understand that what's happening here is that you as a listener, well, you're just bad at your job, all right? I can't take it personal, but I need to capitalize on that. So my job as a speaker is to get and keep your attention. Get and keep your attention. It starts with being organized. All right, audience members are listeners. Listeners are bad at their job. So never, ever, ever have more than 2 or 3 main points. That's it. 2 or 3 main points. When you have 5 or 6, 7 or 8 points, you're killing your audience. You're killing the listener. I know that you have sat in on somebody's presentation at some point and they're going on, and then they say, I've got 2 more things I want to talk about. Then they've got 3 more things. Before long, you're like, please, just shoot me. You're killing me. 2 or 3 main points. That's all that a listener can actually walk away with. And why should you work harder at that? You can't keep any more than that straight. And so your job then as a speaker is to say, okay, I need to edit my information. I don't need to throw the kitchen sink at them. The inexperienced speaker believes that what they have to do is keep saying more. Because if I tell you everything I know, you're going to think that I'm smart. You're going to think I'm worth talking. Pick 2 or 3 main points and make those main points come to life. So that takes me to the second piece of organization. No more than 2 or 3. But inside each one of those main points, you need to breathe some life into those main points. All right? Think of it this way. A main point is a main point is a main point. There's no big deal. Let's use the example of stress. How many of you heard any kind of presentation on stress? Nothing new to be said. So maybe I'm going to do a presentation on stress because I've been asked to do one. And I say, okay, stress wreaks havoc on our life. Stress affects our relationships. And here are I want to give some strategies for overcoming stress. Stress wreaks havoc on our life. Stress affects our relationships. And I want to give some strategies. Big deal, right? Have you ever felt like you've done your main points and they fall flat? That's because a main point is nothing without what we call A's and B's, and those are stories and examples. The thing that makes a presentation come to life are stories and examples. Without them, there's nothing to it. And you'll know it as a presenter because you're going along and you're realizing, I haven't said anything here. For example, when I'm listening to my clients give presentations, those who stop and tell a personal story, all of a sudden that presentation becomes far more memorable. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, I don't have very good stories. Well, you don't have to have earth-shattering stories. Stories can be your stories, they can be somebody else's stories, they can be something you just read in the paper, something you just took off the internet. Examples are simply stories that that bring a little more clarity to what your main point is. So without going into this in too big of a detail, here's what I want you to walk away with. No more than 2 or 3 main points, okay? And every main point needs at least 2 good stories or examples. Think back to the last time you heard the best speaker, the person that moved you the most. I'm going to wager that you probably don't remember every point that they had to say. You don't remember the main points, but I'll bet you what you remember are the stories that they shared, how they made you feel. You see, it's in the stories and examples that audiences can start to relate to what you're talking about. That's when they can start to say, you know what, I can sink my teeth into what you're saying. I've had something like that happen. I get where you're going. And it's in the stories and examples that you remember the best speakers. That's what makes it real. Okay, so that's organization. And there's a few more pieces to it, but in a nutshell, in a 20-minute, 30-minute presentation, that gives you something to start to think about. All right, 2 or 3 main points, and make those main points come alive with some stories and some examples. So let's then move to the second main point. So now that we've talked about organization and the role that that plays in becoming a stronger speaker, let's take a look at the whole thing of fear and nervousness and nervous energy and what's going on there. How many of you would say that when you're getting ready to speak, the very first thing that happens the moment you start to think about speaking, you start to have this rush that comes over your entire body? How many of you have that happen? Me too. Absolutely. What this is an adrenal dump. And I'm not saying anything you don't already know, but I'm curious, do you know where your adrenals are located? Well, they're located right above your kidneys. That's where our adrenals are located. They're teeny tiny. They really are. But these little adrenals wreak havoc on our bodies. We know what they're there for. It's the whole fight or flight, and that's why they're there. But when we have a full-blown adrenal dump, which we generally have moments before or every time we start to think about speaking, it does so many things to us, and that's what I want to talk about. An adrenal dump affects us psychologically. It smacks us physically. And then it kind of marries and it leaves us with this emotional imprint. So I want to look at all of those, all right? I'm going to first start with physical, though. I'm going to go back and start with physical. What happens to our bodies when we have an adrenal dump? You know, our heart rate increases, our blood pressure rises, our eyes dilate, we sweat, we shake, we can't breathe, we can't think. We are having, we have what they call an adrenal dump makes us dumb down and dope up. That's what they'll say. We dumb down and we dope up. We can't think. Doesn't feel good. So when all of that starts to happen to our body, then, and at the same time, I'm just breaking them up so that we can talk about them, but they all happen at the same time, and it all happens like in a nanosecond. So at the same time that our body is having this full-blown anxiety attack, psychologically, we are reacting to that. We are finding, we say to ourselves, I hate this. I don't want this to happen. I don't like this. You can start to imagine the situation way before it happens, right? And so just imagining it, we find ourselves saying, I can't do this. You know that you're going to be speaking, and someone says, are you nervous? And you say, yeah, I'm nervous. Yeah, I'm so nervous. Oh my gosh, I'm beyond nervous. And then those two come together, and they leave us with this emotional impression. And so even when we're not even remotely near having to speak in public, but we have to do something that bumps up against it. Somebody says, I was thinking about maybe having you, present something at the next conference, and you immediately say, no, I can't do that. No, I hate that. I want to go back and look at some of that for a minute. Did you know that physically, your body really doesn't know the difference between positive stress and negative stress? That stress is stress is stress. How many of you enjoy things that go fast? Roller coasters, cars, motorcycles, being out on a boat, anything that goes fast. Why do you enjoy it? Maybe you enjoy rock climbing. Maybe you enjoy skydiving. I don't know. Why do you enjoy it? Because it gives you a rush, right? You like the rush. What if I were to tell you that that same rush is exactly the same thing that happens when you're scared? It's exactly the same thing. What's happened? Your heart rate's increased. Your eyes have dilated. Your blood pressure is rising. And yet when you get done with the roller coaster, you're like, woohoo, let's do that again. So see, our body doesn't know the difference. It's what we do to ourselves psychologically. We give it meaning, and that meaning is what starts to change it. If it's a roller coaster ride and we love roller coasters, we say, that was awesome, let's do it again. But if it's public speaking, you say, I hated that. I felt so out of control. I don't ever want to do that again. So one of the things that we have to do is start to have some kind of control over our bodies. So what that means then is, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with the thing that's going on with us? I'm going to give you one really good strategy for dealing with your body when your body starts to go into full-blown anxiety attack. And here's what I tell people. Fear is physical, fear is psychological, and fear is emotional. If you have to fight physical with physical, psychological with psychological. All right? So we're going to talk about physical here for a minute. When your body's having this full-blown anxiety attack, all right? In fact, just stand up right now. Just stand up. All right? Where do your hands go? What do you do? You're not even quite sure where to put them, right? Why? Because you're having just a slight adrenal dump by standing up. Just a slight adrenal dump. Here is a ton of energy zipping through your body, and it's trying to figure out where to go. All right. I know this sounds crazy, and I don't care. But there is truly only one spot in your entire body that can handle this kind of adrenal dump, and that is right behind you. It's called your buttocks. You need to squeeze your butt like there's no tomorrow. I'm serious. That's what you need to do. Stand up, kind of find your stance, get comfortable, relax your arms, and then squeeze your butt. It is a huge muscle. It's the truth. It's a huge muscle. And when your body feels out of control and you start to shake, why are you shaking? Because your hands, you have ever noticed when you're holding something and you're speaking, your hand starts to shake? Why? Because your hand's trying to handle all that energy, and it can't. It's not strong enough. Or your voice starts to shake because it's trying to control the energy, and it can't. There's only one spot that can control it, and that is your behind. So seriously, that's what you have to do. You have to put the energy behind you. You have to start squeezing your butt like there's no tomorrow. I know this sounds crazy. This is probably hopefully this is the reason you come to my chat room. But seriously, this is the one thing that if you ask any one of my clients, they're going to tell you it works. And it really does work. All right, I'm running out of time here. So let's kind of review what I've talked about. I talked about what are the two major ways to start to get a handle on speaking in front of people, and that is you need to feel organized, right? And by doing that, what do? No more than 2 or 3 main points. You're killing people when you do more than that. And every main point needs to have some CPR given to it, so make sure that you have some good stories and examples. Secondly, keep in mind that your audience members are listeners, and they're just bad at their job. Don't take it so personally when people are giving you that blank look. They're just listeners, all right? So your job is to keep yourself organized and tell them that you're organized so that they can stay with you. Secondly, we talked about what happens to your body when you're experiencing all of this adrenal dump. You know, this is a real thing, and and everybody goes through it. But keep in mind that you've made it horrible by saying to yourself, I hate this experience, because the truth is, imagine your life without the adrenaline buzz. We'd be flatlined. And if you want to see what flatline looks like sometime, just step into a nursing home. Take a look at it. It's really not how we want to live our lives. We want to live our lives so that we have this excitement. We want to live our lives so that when we're 90 years old and somebody's throwing a party for us, that we do have karaoke, that we do have somebody roasting us, but that we also then can grab that mic and thank people for being there. That's the point. Don't walk away from the next situation saying to yourself, I wish I would have said something. I wish I would have said anything. Start changing that. You really can make that happen. Thank you for listening.